Can 4 aging F-14s and 6 missile boats crack a U.S. carrier's armor? Iran thought so. They launched a swarm toward the USS Abraham Lincoln, betting on surprise and numbers. But within 90 seconds, an E-2D Hawkeye lit up the sky with tracks, and the strike group flipped from patrol to kill chain. Why did Iran's saturation attack crumble before it got dangerous? And how did those museum piece tomcats become targets instead of threats? Stay with this. The answer lies in a network that thinks faster than missiles fly. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Iran didn't throw antiques at a supercarrier by accident. On a whiteboard, the logic stacks up. 4 F-14 launches from Bandar Abbas to pull American fighters into a dance they don't control. 6 fast missile boats sprint south from the northern Gulf, riding close to commercial lanes. Coastal radar stitches both moves to a single clock, so boats and jets hit the edge of the carrier group's attention together. One move fixes, the other stabs. If the carrier group reacts late, even by seconds, the boats reach a firing lane and light off a short, hard salvo. But here's the catch. Those F-14Es bring intimidation more than teeth. They lack modern anti-ship missiles. Their task is theater. Force radar modes to shift, pull American fighters off their preferred geometry, soak up bandwidth with radar tracks, and IFF handshakes. The bet says noise equals time, time equals range, and range equals a firing solution for boats that can only shoot if they survive the approach. Swarm math looks great in slides. Multiple axes collapse decision space. Boats hug sea clutter and hide in wake signatures. Jets fly offset to force the defender to split attention between high and low threats. Compress the timeline, and human operators start to lag. Play the odds, and you might land 2 or 3 missiles on something soft before the wall hardens. The dream is not annihilation. It's a nick that forces the carrier to turn, slow flight ops, or buy distance. An operational win dressed up as chaos. Tehran has tested the edges before. Small craft swept near U.S. ships at uncomfortable ranges, darted in and out, and probed radio calls to see how many warnings it took to unlock lethal force. Those passes weren't about sinking anything. They were about stopwatch data. How long to hail, how fast a helicopter lifts, when a destroyer shifts from bridge to bridge, chat to firing chain. Every hesitation becomes a model input. Saturation tactics feed on friction more than firepower. They count on detection lag, comms deconfliction, and the simple fact that every sensor has a duty cycle. If you can force a radar to watch the sky, maybe the sea gets thinner coverage. If you flood the net with tracks at once, maybe correlation slips, or shooters wait for a confident ID. In that crease, a sea skimmer pops up with a seeker already hot. But the ocean is a cruel place for theory. Sea clutter chews up returns. Identification isn't a quick yes or no when fishing dows and fast attackers share the same water. Boats racing in from separate bearings risk crossing into each other's firing sectors. The more you compress the attack, the tighter the deconfliction margin gets, and one error cascades into delay. Delay kills swarms. So why believe it would work? Surprise. First, catch the carrier group in a routine pattern. Force ROE, hesitation with small boats near civilian traffic, and let numbers plus speed outpace the targeting cycle. If even one shooter hesitates, the boats get their shot. That was the bet. Bold, simple, and ruthless on time. But the American cycle wasn't just fast. It was already spinning before the first Tomcat rolled, which meant the window they needed was gone the moment the plan began. The element of surprise died in the first sweep. The E-2D Hawkeye was already up, orbiting well off the bow. Its AN/APY-9 radar panning a wide cone that reached far past the horizon. Think of it like a traffic cop in the sky, sorting every blip before anyone on deck even asked a question. The moment the F-14s clawed above low altitude, the Hawkeye tagged them and pushed clean tracks to the net. That first pass of data cut the plan's legs out from under it. Swarms count on clutter to stall decisions. Here, the opposite happened. Wide area surveillance didn't drown in noise. It cut through it. Sensor fusion stitched air and sea into a single frame that showed who was climbing, who was sprinting, and who was pretending to be harmless. The boats that hoped to hide under sea clutter now sat on a shared map with stable IDs and headings. The jets that were meant to pull attention away only highlighted where the real push would come from. Then the flip. The strike group shifted from patrol to engagement posture in a heartbeat. Search radars narrowed to track while scan. Contacts went from detected to firm track to weapons quality as the algorithm scrubbed and matched hits. Consoles lit along the carrier's combat direction center. On the escorts, fire control teams got green feeds without asking for them. No one shouted, they didn't need to. The network handled the choreography. Link 16 carried the picture across holes and cockpits. The carrier's CDC saw what the Hawkeye saw. Arleigh Burke destroyers saw it too, in the same format at the same time. Super Hornets on station got vectors and target data on their displays, paired with headings that made the intercept almost routine. That's how you collapse a timeline. No phone calls, no relay delays, no say again, just shared truth, updated every few seconds. Mark the clock. Inside 90 seconds, the F-14s were classified, their climbs logged, their emissions marked. Surface tracks that looked like high-speed boats, locked into groups, with courses that pointed at the outer ring of the formation. Within minutes, intercept geometry firmed up. Fighters got altitudes and speeds to sanitize the air picture. Destroyers aligned their sensors to build firing solutions without waiting for visual confirmation. Here's where things got really interesting. Track correlation algorithms linked returns from different sensors and removed duplicates, the kind of ambiguity swarms try to create. Cooperative engagement let one platform's eyes feed another platform's trigger. When the boats tried to use speed to widen the gap, the net tightened. When the jets tried to mask in background clutter, the net separated them cleanly. If chaos was the cover, mapping chaos in real time stripped it bare. The pre-dawn haze, the sea clutter, the crowded lanes, none of it bought the attackers the delay they needed. The Hawkeye kept the whole board updated, a rolling audit that left no corner dark. So how fast did the Lincoln see it? Faster than the attackers could act on it. Track quality data flowed in under 90 seconds. With the E-2D directing a common air and the sea picture, the swarm couldn't outrun. Seeing is one thing, silencing is another, and the first punch came from the sky. Did those F-14s stall the air wing long enough? That was the hope, but the intercept geometry already favored the defenders. Super Hornets, cued by the E-2D, climbed on precise vectors, noses cold to reduce signature, then lit their radars only when it paid. They weren't hunting, they were sanitizing lanes. Every track had altitude, speed, and intent tagged. The Tomcats pushed in pairs, offset to force splits, but they were walking into a net that had already closed. The F-14s carried teeth, short and medium-range air-to-air missiles, but they faced fighters with longer sticks and cleaner sightlines. The AIM-120D gave the Americans reach that mattered, speed to build pressure early, bigger no-escape zones that punish a defender who hesitates, mid-course updates flowing over the data link so the shot stayed smart while the launch jet maneuvered, terminal guidance that snapped on at the last moment, cutting warning time. The network fed the missiles like a brain, not a guess. Here's where things got really interesting. The first OMRAM went active at range. A Tomcat's threat receiver screamed. That jet immediately turned cold, dumping altitude and dragging chaff to break lock. That single defensive turn bled energy and shattered formation timing. Now the boats had fewer seconds because their air screen had just gone defensive. Another AMRAM rode a clean track from off-board queuing. No radar spike from the shooter until late. The Tomcat pilot never got the first shot. He got survival math. Beyond visual range tactics, reward the first clean trigger pull. Get the first shot, and you force your opponent defensive. And once a fighter turns to live, it stops fighting for the plan. Radar cross-section plays into that dance. Smaller signatures stay hidden longer. Larger ones get bracketed earlier. Data link quality decides who sees who first, and whose missiles keep getting smarter in flight. The Super Hornets worked in pairs tied to the Hawkeye and the destroyers. The Tomcats had to make their own picture with legacy sensors. That age gap bit hard. The F-14's old radar and analog workflows struggled against modern AESA sets that can track, sort, and stay quiet until needed. Off-board queuing let U.S. fighters fly with their own emitters managed, then pop them on for a clean snapshot. The Tomcats needed their radars to build a shot, which lit them up and let the net tag them tighter. Every second they spent building a solution was a second the AMRAAM needed to seal it. You won't believe what happened next. 2 Tomcats broke away under missile pressure, dumping the distraction playbook. Another tried to beam the shot, turning perpendicular to spoof the seeker, but the mid-course updates kept the missile on a smart line. The window for the boats kept shrinking, second by second, mile by mile. A final pair pressed, hoping to trade shots inside a merge, but they never got there. The network kept them at arm's length and kept feeding weapons-quality tracks. Multiple Tomcats went down or aborted within minutes. The distraction unraveled, the air picture cleared. And with that screen gone, the boats lost their shadow. Without an air screen, the boats aren't invisible. They're next on the grid. 6 missiles break the surface and run low, hugging the chop, seekers peeking through the glare. The boats kept their end of the bargain. Launch on the clock, fire in pairs, then turn out. The sea-skimmers dig into the radar horizon, riding wave tops to steal seconds. On a single ship, 6 at once strains consoles, splits attention, and dares a mistake. But the group isn't a single ship, and the wall they meet is layered, rehearsed, and already awake. Outer ring, first. An Aegis destroyer takes the far tracks. SM-2s lofting off the rails with quick climbs, then nose down into guidance. The shared picture seeds each shot with clean geometry. The first intercept snaps the wave from 6 to 4. Another SM-2 reaches across, fusing in a tight envelope, breaking a second seeker before it enters its terminal weave. Now the attack isn't a wall, it's a gap with teeth missing. Mid-layer moves as the range collapses. ESSMs come out fast, smaller but agile, cued by the same net. They don't hunt blind. Each one rides a refined track pushed from the Hawkeye and the destroyer's fire control. A third missile dies in a hard crossing intercept, warhead and debris folding into the spray. A fourth tries to dip lower, its seeker chasing a return that shifts as the formation maneuvers just enough to complicate the angle. The ESSM adjusts and kills it clean before the last second jink begins. Here's where things got really interesting. One leaker presses, weaving in terminal, but the seekers and countermeasures start to argue. Decoys throw a hotter, closer target. The missile bites early, slewing off, nose hunting for a hull that isn't there. It spends its last seconds on a ghost and splashes short. The final survivor closes to the knife fight range, and that's CIWS territory. The mount wakes, spits a tight burst, and the track disintegrates into a foam line that never reaches steel. Now the math that matters. 6 threats can swamp one combat system. Linked shooters change the odds. When ships share tracks and time their shots to open and close windows, the probability of raid annihilation jumps. You don't stack all intercepts at one range. You ladder them, forcing the attackers to run a gauntlet where each layer sees cleaner than the last. That's the point of a net that thinks in sequences, not single throws. Yes, interceptors cost real money. SM-2s and ESSMs burn budgets in minutes. But a mission kill on a carrier would cost far more in lives, capability, and strategy. Trading missiles for certainty is the cheapest option on the table when the alternative is a damaged flight deck and a halted air wing. So what's left after the splash pattern? The wave is spent, the surface quiet again, and the formation hasn't even altered course. The carrier keeps her speed, jets cycle on schedule, and the escort radars cool down to watch. With the salvo neutralized at range, attention shifts. If the missiles are gone, the launchers and the radars that fed them just marked themselves. Defense buys time. Offense ends the fight. Defense bought minutes. Now the job is to erase the launch web so the next wave never forms. With the raid spent and the threat picture stable, the rules of engagement open a lane. Suppress the shooters, blind the eyes, and take away re-attack options. The strike group doesn't chase boats across crowded lanes. It targets the plumbing that made the salvo possible. Coastal radars queuing traffic, command nodes that timed the run, and hardened pens that shelter fast craft between sorties. Coastal sites sit close to towns and ports, which means precision or nothing. Antennas share skylines with cranes. Boat pens sit behind concrete, under camouflage netting, with fuel trucks parked a block from fishermen. The tension is obvious. One bad fuse setting, one lazy angle, and bystanders pay. So planners strip the plan to verified emitters, persistent tracks, and munitions that can be steered to the meter. The tool set fits the brief. A ARGM hunts radars that try to play dead, writing emissions when they spike and switching to known coordinates when they cut power. JSOW glides in from far outside point defense envelopes, carrying unitary or submunition loads that break concrete and tear open roofs. SLAMER gives a man-in-the-loop view for last-second aim point shifts, useful when a vehicle rolls near a target line. JASSM-type weapons reach deeper command sites, hitting from low altitude with precision guidance that survives GPS jamming. None of this asks a pilot to fly into a SAM ring. Here's where things got really interesting. A coastal radar blinks on to refresh the maritime plot. The emitter spikes on the board. An AARGM rides the whisper, updates mid-course from off-board cues, and dives as the radar tries to cut power. The site goes dark, not damaged by chance, but by a seeker that knew where the van, the mast, and the cable run actually sat. Minutes later, standoff glide weapons ripple in toward a boat pen with two fast craft under tarps. Slammer feeds back a clean view of the pen's mouth. A controller shifts the crosshair 2 meters to keep the blast inside the revetment. One weapon cracks the roof. The second walks the key. The boats stop being boats. Kill chain disruption beats attrition. You don't chase every hull if the radars can't see and the command net can't clock a launch. Remove the sensors, remove the timing nodes, and raids die in planning rooms. What's left are isolated boats with no picture, no protection, and no green light to sprint into a wall they can't map. The message lands with each strike card closed, proportional and precise. No American casualties, launchers and sensors clipped without torching a port. That's deterrence by control, not noise, showing that you can take away the means without punishing the bystanders who had no say. So what did the ledgers show when the smoke thinned? Multiple radars offline, boat pens cracked, command relays disrupted, and no need to move the carrier an inch off station. In under 6 hours, the networked response degraded the launch web and froze the next swarm before it could form. The last piece is the lesson hardliners didn't want to learn. So what turned those museum pieces into liabilities? It wasn't age alone. It was the mismatch between legacy airframes that see and think in narrow cones, and a kill web that sees across domains and shares a single truth across ships and jets in seconds. An old fighter with a decent missile can still fight, but if it builds its own picture slowly and broadcasts to do it, the network reads that as a flare. It marks the source, times the rhythm, and assigns shooters before the older jet even settles on a firing solution. Numbers feel powerful at first glance. 4 jets, 6 boats, multiple bearings, all sprinting. But numbers without perception and timing become noise. If the attackers can't hold a stable track on the right target, or if they rely on a single coastal radar to keep the clock, their mass collapses into a staggered push. The defender doesn't need more hulls. The defender needs cleaner data. When the web gives that clarity, the raid's extra bodies only add more icons to delete. Here's where things got really interesting. The tech delta lives in 4 places: sensor reach, track quality, data latency, and weapon guidance. Reach decides who sees first beyond the horizon, and seeing first lets you set geometry. Track quality decides whether a blip is worth a missile or just glare. Latency decides if the picture you shoot on is live or stale.